My parents forced me to quit my dream job to babysit my sister's kids for free, so I moved out, and their entire plan collapsed instantly. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the dependable one in my family, the person everyone assumes will drop everything to fix whatever chaos they've created. It's strange how early that label stuck to me, like I was born with a tool belt and a checklist instead of actual personal desires. Even now, after finally landing the job I'd worked years for, a creative role I dreamed about since college, my family still sees me as the same predictable backup plan they raised me to be. I should have been celebrating, but a knot formed in my stomach even as I walked through my parents' front door with the news. "Wow, that's great, honey," my mom said, though her voice had this soft hesitation, like the words were coated in disappointment. My dad nodded but immediately followed with, "Just remember, family still needs you." I stood there, holding my new job contract folder, wondering why good news always felt like a burden around them. The air felt heavy, the house dim despite the afternoon lights spilling through the curtains, and I suddenly felt like a kid again, small, guilty, responsible. They eased into it slowly, pretending it was casual conversation. "Your sister has a lot on her plate," my mom murmured. "Yeah, 2 kids, full-time job. She's overwhelmed," my dad added. Then my mom looked straight at me, her tone deceptively gentle. "And you? Well, you don't have real responsibilities yet. Not like Rachel." I felt that sting, quiet but sharp. But I forced a smile, telling myself I was imagining it. Maybe they were just proud parents worrying about the family dynamic. Maybe I was reading too much into things. I tried to push the unease down, until my phone buzzed that evening. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I answered, and before I could even say hello, she said, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" And something in her tone told me this wasn't going to be small. When I picked up Rachel's call, I could already hear the frantic edge in her voice, the same tone she used whenever she needed something from me. "I just need you for one afternoon," she said, breathless. "It's an emergency appointment, and I can't bring the kids." I hesitated, staring at my work laptop glowing on my desk. My first real project was due soon. But that old reflex kicked in, the one conditioned over decades. I sighed and said, "Yeah, okay, I can help." The moment I walked into her house the next day, the chaos slapped me in the face. Toys covered the floor like landmines. The TV was blaring some kids' show, and the air smelled faintly of spilled juice. Rachel rushed past me, grabbing her purse, barely making eye contact. "You're a lifesaver," she said, kissing the air in my direction. "Seriously, I owe you." But her tone made it sound like she didn't expect to ever repay the debt. As the door closed behind her, I let out a long breath. The kids were already climbing on me, demanding snacks and attention. My phone buzzed with work emails I knew I'd fall behind on. Still, I pushed through the afternoon, telling myself it was just a one-off favor. When Rachel finally returned, an hour later than she'd promised, she didn't even apologize. Instead, she smiled like this was routine. "You're really good at this," she said, dropping her phone on the counter. I forced a laugh. "It's just today, right?" She shrugged. "Well, we'll see." That night, my parents called with overly sweet voices, praising me for being such a good brother. It felt less like appreciation and more like reinforcement, like they wanted me to accept this role before I even realized I was slipping into it. I tried to convince myself it meant nothing, until the following morning, when Rachel texted again. "Hey, can you watch them today too? Just for a bit." And something in my gut twisted, warning me this wasn't just a favor anymore. By the third day, I could already feel the shift, like the ground under my feet was tilting, and I was the only one pretending nothing was happening. Rachel didn't even bother with the fake urgency this time. She just called and said, "I'm dropping the kids off in 10 minutes, as if I were a hired nanny waiting for my shift to start. I stared at my phone, stunned, my mind racing with the amount of work I had piling up. But before I could protest, I heard her hang up. There wasn't a question in her tone, just expectation. When she showed up, she barely slowed down. "Snacks are in the bag. Their tablets are dead. Charge them. I'll be back later." "Rachel, wait," I said, reaching for her arm. She paused, looking annoyed. "What? I'm already late. This isn't how you ask for a favor." She rolled her eyes. "It's just the kids. Your family. Stop being dramatic." The door shut before I could find the words that were choking in my throat. My apartment felt smaller with the kids running around, louder, harder to breathe in. The sunlight pouring through the blinds suddenly felt harsh, and the room seemed cluttered with responsibilities I never agreed to carry. Every ping from my work email made my chest tighten. I was falling behind, slipping, losing control. That evening, when my parents called, I tried to explain. "Mom, Dad, this is too much. I can't keep doing this." My mom's voice sharpened. "Your sister needs help. You're free most days." Dad chimed in. "You don't have a spouse or kids. You have flexibility." I felt my jaw clench. "I have a job. A real job." My mom sighed heavily, like I was the disappointment. "Don't start being selfish, okay?" It wasn't until later that night, while scrolling through my notifications, that I saw the message that made my blood run cold. Rachel texting a friend. "He'll watch them. He always does." And in that moment, I finally realized they weren't asking for my help anymore. They were claiming it. The next morning, my manager called me into his office, and the moment I stepped inside, I felt the tension pressing against my chest. The room was too bright, the air too still, and his expression told me everything before he even spoke. "You've missed 2 deadlines," he said gently, folding his hands on the desk. "Is everything okay at home?" His voice was calm, but it struck something deep inside me, a mix of embarrassment and panic. I couldn't tell him the truth, that I was drowning under responsibilities that weren't mine. So I just nodded and muttered, "I'm handling it. It won't happen again." Walking out of his office, the hallway lights felt harsh against my eyes. I could almost hear my heartbeat echoing off the walls. I'd worked so hard for this job, this chance, and it was already slipping through my fingers because I was too afraid to say no. That evening, when I got home, my parents were waiting for me like they'd been rehearsing their lines all day. My mom said, "How was work?" with that sugary tone that always meant something else. Before I could answer, my dad added, "Your sister had a hard day. Maybe you can step up more." I blinked. I literally just got home. Mom shrugged. "Family doesn't run on schedules." Dad nodded, sealing it. "Rachel needs you." I felt something inside me snap, a small crack I tried to hide behind a tired smile. "I can't keep doing everything," I said quietly. My mom sighed dramatically. "Your job is making you cold." Dad frowned. "We raised you better than this." Before I could even process their guilt-tripping, Rachel barged in, her kids trailing behind her. "You can pick them up from school tomorrow, right?" she said, not even greeting me. I froze. "Rachel, no. I have work." She scoffed. "It's 1 hour. Don't be difficult." Her kids tugged at her sleeve, asking for snacks, and she turned to me like I was staff. "Just handle it. You're good with them." And as she walked past me, something in her tone made my stomach sink. This wasn't a request. This was a decision she'd already made for me, and I realized I was losing control piece by piece. By the end of the week, everything came crashing down at once. I walked into work with this desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, I could fix the mess I'd slipped into. But before I even sat down, HR called me in. The room felt colder than usual, the hum of the AC loud enough to drown out my thoughts. My HR rep looked at me with that tight, sympathetic smile people use when they're about to ruin your day. "We need to discuss your performance," she said, sliding a folder toward me. Hearing the words "formal warning" felt like someone had dropped a weight straight into my chest. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to nod even though my throat felt like it was closing. When I left the office, my vision blurred at the edges. It wasn't just a bad week. It was the beginning of something much worse. I went straight to my parents' house, rehearsing what I needed to say the entire drive. "Mom, Dad, my job is at risk," I began, trying to explain gently. My mom didn't even look concerned. "Well, maybe this is a sign," she said. "A sign of what?" I asked, taken aback. "That you need to focus on family," she replied. My dad nodded firmly. "Your sister needs help. Dreams can wait." My pulse spiked, heat rushing to my face. "It's not a dream. It's my career." Rachel walked in at that exact moment, arms crossed like she'd been waiting. "Why can't you just support me? You don't have kids. You don't have a spouse. You don't have anything tying you down." I stared at her. "I have my life." She scoffed. "Then use it for something meaningful." Then my father delivered the blow I never expected. "You should quit the job. Your family needs you more than some company." I felt my stomach twist, a sickening mix of disbelief and betrayal. Their faces were so calm, like they weren't dismantling the one thing I'd worked years to build. And in that moment, standing in my childhood living room, I realized something terrifying. They weren't asking me to sacrifice. They were demanding it, and they weren't going to stop. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying their words over and over like some twisted mantra. Quit. Help your sister. Family needs you. My phone buzzed at least a dozen times. Parents, Rachel, even random relatives somehow looped into the drama, but I ignored every one of them. I needed air. Just space to think. So I grabbed my jacket and walked outside, letting the cold night hit my face like a slap back into reality. When I got back home, something told me to check the family group chat, the one I usually ignored because it was mostly baby photos and guilt-laced reminders. As I scrolled, a message thread caught my eye. It wasn't the main chat. It was a private one between Mom, Dad, and Rachel, and somehow I was still in it. I clicked it open, and my heart stopped. Rachel had written, "If we push him enough, he'll quit. He always caves." My mom responded, "Good. Once he's home, we can convert his room for the kids." Then my dad, "He won't fight us. He never does." And finally Rachel again, "Free childcare. Problem solved." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I heard the voices in my head louder than the silence around me. Every guilt trip, every family first, every moment they dismissed my career like it was a hobby. They weren't supporting Rachel. They were stripping away my life piece by piece. I walked downstairs the next morning, still numb, and confronted them. "I saw your messages," I said quietly. My mom blinked innocently. "What messages?" Rachel scoffed. "Are you spying on us now?" Dad waved a hand dismissively. "You misunderstand things, son." "No," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "I finally understand everything." Their denial was instant, rehearsed, and cold. But I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. Because deep down, a new, unfamiliar thought had started forming. One that scared them more than any yelling ever could. I was done playing the role they wrote for me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to cave. After that confrontation, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a door clicking shut. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. I stopped trying to make them see the damage they were doing. And because I stopped reacting, they assumed they'd won. That silence was exactly what I needed to start planning my escape. For the next week, I kept my head down and pretended nothing had changed. Rachel still dropped off her kids unannounced. My parents still delivered their daily guilt sermons. Every time I pushed back even a little, Mom would say, "You're not yourself lately," as if my independence was a symptom of illness. Dad would add, "Your sister is drowning. Why won't you help?" And Rachel? She'd just shrug and say, "It's family. You don't say no to family." I started researching apartments during my lunch breaks, scrolling through listings with my heart pounding, terrified they'd somehow sense what I was doing. The idea of moving out felt like betrayal, because they'd trained me to feel that way. But every night, after babysitting duties and emotional manipulation sessions, I forced myself to open my laptop and compare prices, locations, leases. It became my secret rebellion. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside and said, "You seem more focused this week. Everything okay?" I nodded. "Not yet, but it will be." For the first time in months, I meant it. When I finally found a small but clean apartment across town, I felt this strange combination of fear and relief wash over me. I signed the lease in silence, hands trembling, heart racing. It felt like stepping off a cliff, but in a direction that was finally mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not Rachel. Especially not Rachel. The move-in date circled in red on my calendar felt like a ticking clock inside my chest. Because now I had a plan. A real one. And if they found out too soon, they'd do everything in their power to stop me. The closer I got to my move-out date, the heavier everything felt, like the walls in my parents' house were slowly leaning inward, waiting to collapse on top of me. I was moving in silence, hiding boxes in my car trunk, keeping my keys separate, deleting every apartment-related email the moment I read it. I thought I was being careful. I thought they hadn't noticed the shift in me. But manipulators can always sense when their control starts slipping, and my family wasn't about to let go without a fight. It happened on a Sunday morning. I walked into the living room, still groggy, and found every single member of my family sitting there. Mom, Dad, Rachel, even an aunt I barely spoke to. Mom folded her hands delicately. Sit down. We need to talk. I stayed standing. About what? Rachel crossed her arms. About you abandoning us. I felt my stomach drop. What are you talking about? Dad pointed at me sharply. Your attitude. Your selfishness. Your refusal to help your sister. Then Rachel pulled out a typed, printed packet, stapled, organized, horrifying. This is the kids' schedule, she said. Their school times, feeding routines, nap windows, everything you'll need once you quit. I stared at her. Once I what? Mom jumped in. Once you quit that stressful, pointless job. It's destroying who you are. My voice cracked. My job is the only thing that's mine. Dad leaned forward. And your family should come before yourself. Always. It felt like the room tilted. My legs weakened. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack open. You can't be serious, I whispered. Rachel scoffed. Stop being dramatic. This is what families do. No, I said, voice shaking. This is what you want me to do. Mom stood abruptly. If you refuse again, then you can't live here. We won't support this selfish phase. Dad added coldly. Either step up or get out. And that was the moment, the rock bottom. The moment I realized they weren't just pressuring me. They were willing to throw me away if I didn't comply. I walked to my room, trembling, shutting the door behind me as quietly as I could. Not because I was scared, but because I knew what I had to do next. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, my whole body shaking as the weight of what just happened pressed down on me. My parents' voices still echoed in the hallway, sharp, disappointed, certain they'd cornered me into obedience. For a few minutes, I just stood there, staring at the wall, feeling this mixture of fear and clarity burning through me. Get out. The phrase pulsed in my chest like a heartbeat. Not out of rebellion, not out of anger, out of survival. I grabbed the duffel bag I'd been slowly filling with essentials, clothes, documents, the few things that actually belonged to me and not the version of me they created. Every zipper sounded louder than it should have, but no one came upstairs. They assumed I was in my room, cooling off, probably waiting for me to come groveling back with an apology. For once, I didn't care what they expected. When I walked down the hallway, the house was eerily quiet. I paused at my parents' door, lights slipping through the bottom, their muffled voices arguing. I didn't listen. I didn't want to. I walked past quietly, down the stairs, the railing cold under my fingers. Each step felt like crossing an invisible barrier I had never dared to approach before. At the front door, I left a small envelope with a short note. Thank you for everything, but I can't live like this anymore. I need my own life. No explanations. No guilt. Nothing they could twist into another obligation. When I stepped outside, the night air hit me with a force that made my eyes sting. I loaded the bag into my car, started the engine, and pulled away before the fear could convince me to turn back. My phone started vibrating, call after call, text after text. I didn't check a single one. I just drove, focusing on the faint streetlights, the empty roads, the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. When I reached my new apartment, the hallway smelled like paint and dust, foreign, unfamiliar, but mine. I locked the door behind me. Silence greeted me, but it wasn't loneliness. It was freedom, raw, quiet, terrifying freedom. And that night, for the first time ever, I blocked every single one of them. For the first few days, my phone stayed on silent as messages piled up, missed calls, walls of texts, even voice notes from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't open any of them. I didn't need to. The desperation in the notifications alone told me everything was unraveling. And part of me braced for what I knew was coming, the chaos they'd created for themselves now that their dependable one had finally stepped away. On the 5th day, I got a call from my cousin, one of the few people who wasn't in the family manipulation ecosystem. I'm not taking sides, she said, but things are bad over there. I swallowed. How bad? Well, Rachel had to take her kids to work with her today. It didn't go well. I leaned against the wall of my new apartment, the faint smell of fresh paint grounding me. What happened? She got written up. My breath caught, not out of guilt, but realization. The foundation they built, all of it, depended completely on me. More updates came over the next couple of days, each one hitting harder than the last. Rachel's daycare application got denied because there was no consistent pickup person. My parents' utilities spiked because the kids were now at their house constantly. Their arguments got so loud the neighbors complained. They weren't a functioning system anymore. They were a collapsing machine with no one left to exploit. Meanwhile, my life, quietly, carefully, began to steady. I cleaned my apartment. I cooked for myself. I slept without waking up to someone yelling my name. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else's needs. But the fallout kept coming. One evening, my uncle called. "Your parents are saying you abandoned the family," he said bluntly. I closed my eyes. I didn't abandon them. I just stopped being their unpaid solution. He hesitated, then admitted, "Honestly, everyone sees it now. They depended on you too much." The line went quiet for a moment. Then he said, almost reluctantly, "They're falling apart without you, and they're too proud to admit it." I hung up slowly, feeling a strange mix of sadness, relief, and something I hadn't felt in years, power. But I knew this wasn't over yet. Not even close. It took nearly 3 weeks before I finally agreed to meet them. Not because I missed them, not because I felt guilty, but because I wanted to face them from a place I had never stood in before, strength. We met at a small cafe near my new place, neutral ground where no one could raise their voice or slam doors. As I walked inside, I saw them immediately, my parents stiff and tense, Rachel tapping her foot like she was already annoyed. They looked smaller somehow, like the chaos had drained the arrogance right out of them. My mom spoke first. "We need you to come home," she said, her voice trembling between desperation and command. I sat down slowly. "Why?" Dad leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "Your sister can't handle everything alone. The kids need routine." Rachel threw her hands up. "I'm exhausted. You know how hard this is." I stared at her. "You mean since your free childcare disappeared?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't twist things. You abandoned us." I felt something settle inside me. Calm, steady, unmovable. "I didn't abandon anyone," I said quietly. "I walked away from a role you forced on me." Mom shook her head. "We were just asking for help." "No," I replied. "You were demanding obedience." For a moment, silence fell over the table. The clinking of cups, the soft cafe chatter around us. It all felt surreal, like the world was finally moving while they were stuck. Rachel tried again. "You can still come back. Move home, just until things settle." I met her eyes. No, her face twisted. "What happened to family?" "They took advantage of me," I said. "That's what happened." Dad exhaled sharply. "So you're choosing yourself over us?" For the first time in my life, I said, "Yes." My mom's eyes filled with this wounded disbelief, the kind that used to drag me straight into guilt, but it didn't work this time. I felt grounded, anchored, different. The three of them stared at me like they didn't recognize who I'd become. And I guess, in a way, they didn't. Because the version of me, who always caved, he wasn't coming back. After that confrontation, something inside me finally, fully, unlocked. There was no guilt, no second-guessing, no urge to chase after their approval. I walked out of that cafe feeling lighter than I had in years, like I'd stepped out of a skin that never belonged to me. The world outside felt sharper, clearer, the hum of traffic, the warm air, even the weight of my keys in my pocket felt like pieces of a life I finally owned. And for the first time, the silence from my family didn't feel threatening. It felt peaceful. Work became my anchor. I showed up early. I stayed focused. I didn't miss a single deadline. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside, smiling. "I've noticed a huge shift in you," he said. "Keep this up. There's a promotion cycle next quarter." My chest tightened in the best way. I nodded, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Life outside work became something I never imagined it could be. I cooked meals that actually tasted good, played music without worrying about being called downstairs, and spent evenings on my balcony letting the sunset bleed across the sky. Freedom didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Meanwhile, the updates about my family trickled in. Rachel finally put her kids in daycare, mostly because she had no other choice. My parents started arguing less, apparently realizing they couldn't keep using me as glue. The family system they built on my back had collapsed, and then rebuilt itself without me. One day, an aunt called. "Things are calmer now," she said. "Your parents, they're learning." Slowly, I nodded. "Good. I hope they do." "Will you ever go back?" she asked gently. I looked out over my balcony, the city lights stretching into the distance. "No," I said softly. "I'll visit. but I'm not going back to who I was. And that was the real ending. Not revenge, not punishment, but reclaiming a life they never let me have. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone else's world. It's finally building your own.